So picture this. You're trying to debug a network issue. Literally, every light on your dashboard is flashing green, but your users, they're practically rioting over these mysterious random slowdowns. We've all been there, right? Well, today, we're unmasking this incredibly frustrating reality of silent dual-stack network failures. Basically, instances where your trusty IPv4 is actually just masking a completely broken IPv6 path. Welcome to the explainer that's going to completely rebuild your diagnostic toolkit. Now, our deep dive today is strictly focused on part 2 of a massive 8-part tutorial called IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This is an incredible resource put together by Virtualization Options LLC, which is a technology research, education, and advisory group out in Colorado. It's built specifically for you, sysadmins and tech support folks who already know your way around IPv4 troubleshooting and are now tasked with supporting your organization's migration to IPv6. We are exclusively digging into Chapter 2 today, completely zeroing in on these tricky dual-stack issues. We've got a really packed agenda today to help you unlearn some of those legacy assumptions. We'll be looking at 1. Unlearning IPv4 muscle memory, 2. The dual-stack reality, 3. Unmasking silent connectivity failures, 4. Why ICMPv6 is mandatory, 5. Tunnels, NAT64, and VPNs, and finally, 6. The troubleshooting golden rules. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Unlearning IPv4 muscle memory and breaking old habits. The absolutely crucial point here is that before you can troubleshoot effectively in this new landscape, you've got to break that old muscle memory. For decades, we've relied on specific tools and architectures, right? Well, now you need to toss the idea of broadcast pings entirely out the window. Running a ping to 255.255.255.255, it's completely meaningless now because IPv6 replaces broadcast entirely with targeted multicast. On top of that, your firewall designs have to completely change. Because NAT is largely absent now and practically every device is globally routable, your security mindset has to shift from just edge translation to actual strict endpoint filtering. And honestly, the biggest conceptual shift you're going to face is exactly this. A single IPv4 address morphing into a whole stack of IPv6 addresses on a single host. Having multiple addresses per interface, like your link locals starting with FET80, right alongside your global unicast and temporary privacy addresses, all existing at the exact same time, that is the new normal. If you log in and see multiple IPs, please do not try to fix it. That is just IPv6 working exactly as it was designed to. Moving on to Section 2, the dual stack reality, IPv4 and IPv6 working together. Let's look at what happens when both of these protocols are running side by side in production. Because, let's face it, that's exactly where most of you are operating today. So have you ever wondered why a website feels painfully sluggish, but when you run a basic ping test, it looks perfectly fine? Enter happy eyeballs, which is defined in RFC 8305. Basically, browsers naturally prefer IPv6, but if they don't get a response, they will race it against IPv4, but only after 250 millisecond delay. Think about what that means in practice. If your IPv6 path is broken, every single new connection your user makes takes a 250 millisecond penalty. Multiply that by what? Dozens of assets loading on a single web page? The internet feels awful, but no error message ever actually pops up. Let's check out another really sneaky silent failure, duplicate address detection, or DAD. When an interface comes up, it sends out a neighbor solicitation. If another host responds, well, a conflict is detected, and the OS marks the address as DAD failed, meaning zero connectivity. So if you're looking at your command line and you see an address just permanently stuck as tentative or DAD failed, you're looking right at a DAD failure timeline. And just as a heads up, in modern virtualization, this happens all the time when VM MAC addresses accidentally get cloned. Here's another massive paradigm shift for you. Where exactly does your default gateway come from? In the IPv4 world, DHCP just handed it to you. Easy. But in IPv6, router advertisements, or RAs, carry the default gateway. Unlike those old IPv4 DHCP leases, there's actually no explicit gateway renewal process here. The host just relies on periodic RA refreshes. So if a device drops its default route silently, it usually means your RAs are either being blocked by a misconfigured switch, or a router is sending an RA with a lifetime of 0, which intentionally tells the client to just immediately drop the route. All right, Section 3, Unmasking Silent Connectivity Failures. Now we get to diagnose some of the absolute most confusing and misleading failure modes you'll ever encounter. Why do small pings succeed, but SSH sessions and large file transfers completely stall right after the TCP handshake? This is the classic symptom that drives network engineers absolutely up the wall. I mean, you can ping the server perfectly. The TCP handshake completes just fine. But the second you try to pull a large file or establish an SSH session, it just completely hangs forever. Why? Well, it is almost always a path MTU discovery failure.
See, in IPv4, routers could just fragment large packets on the fly. In IPv6, they don't do that anymore. If a packet is too big for a link, the router just drops it and sends back an ICMPv6 packet too big message. But if your firewall blocks that message, the sender never actually knows it needs to shrink the packet, creating a total black hole. You can confirm this pretty easily by testing a small ping versus a large ping. The primary fix here is absolutely mandatory. You must permit ICMPv6 Type 2 inbound on your firewalls. Alternatively, you could use TCP MSS clamping to force the endpoints to agree on a smaller, safer packet size. And golden rule here, the absolute minimum MTU for IPv6 is 1280 bytes. Never go lower than that.
Another silent killer you've got to watch out for involves extension headers. Middle boxes, we're talking your legacy firewalls, load balancers, WAN optimizers. They often just panic and drop packets that have unexpected IPv6 extension headers. We have all pulled our hair out over these. If you've already rolled out MTU issues and you're still seeing these mysterious silent drops for totally legitimate traffic, you absolutely have to run a Wireshark capture. Look specifically for middle boxes aggressively filtering these headers out of sheer ignorance to the new protocol. Moving to Section 4, why ICMPv6 is mandatory. Essential signaling. And when I say mandatory, I mean mandatory. It's no longer just an optional diagnostic tool you can blindly block for the sake of security. Honestly, if you only remember one single thing from this entire explainer, let it be these mandatory protocols. Blocking these specific ICMPv6 types will instantly, literally, break your network. Type 2 is critical for PATHM2 discovery, like we just talked about. Types 133 through 137, those are completely vital for the neighbor discovery protocol. Without them, your hosts can't find routers, and they can't resolve addresses. You absolutely must explicitly permit these through your access control lists. To really grasp why those ICMP types are so critical, you have to look at how address resolution has fundamentally changed. IPv4 uses ARP, right? It just broadcasts to everyone on the subnet to find an IP address. Well, IPv6 replaces ARP entirely with the Neighbor Discovery Protocol, or NDP, which relies heavily on targeted multicast. You've got to replace all your old ARP command line tools with NDP commands, and crucially, you have to make sure your network switches support MLD, or multicast listener discovery snooping. If they don't, they're going to treat this new multicast traffic just like broadcast traffic, and that leads to massive multicast floods crippling your infrastructure. All right, Section 5, tunnels, NAT64, and VPNs, transition mechanisms. These edge cases add some really fascinating layers of complexity to how we troubleshoot. So when you're trying to let an IPv6-only client talk to an IPv4-only server, you typically use NAT64 and DNS64. But this setup has some really unique failure points. Sometimes DNS64 just fails to synthesize the AAA records properly. Or maybe your NAT64 translation pool simply runs out of IP space. But I'll tell you, the most common and definitely the most frustrating issue is legacy applications that hard-code IPv4 literals. Think of an NAT trying to connect directly to 1.2.3.4. That completely bypasses the DNS64 synthesis step, which means the whole NAT64 process just completely falls apart. And of course, VPNs are another massive pain point in a dual-stack world. You generally see two main issues with split tunneling here. The first is what we call the leak. This is where the VPN captures all the IPv4 traffic but totally ignores IPv6. So the user accidentally bypasses corporate security and exposes their real IP to the internet over IPv6. Not great. The second issue is the black hole. This is where the client software blocks IPv6 to prevent that leak, but doesn't actually tunnel it. So if users are complaining that internal corporate sites work perfectly, but the external internet drops the second they get on the VPN, you're probably dealing with this unrouted IPv6 black hole. To fix it, you either need to push a full IPv6 default route right through the tunnel or explicitly disable IPv6 on the client interface. And finally, Section 6, IPv6 troubleshooting golden rules. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today on the fundamental differences here, so let's distill this into our final foundation.
These principles are the true foundation of your new troubleshooting mindset. Number 1, never, ever block ICMPv6 entirely. Number 2, accept that having multiple addresses on one single interface is totally normal and correct. Don't try to fix it. Number 3, learn NDP and make sure your switches actually use MLD snooping. And lastly, because ISPs can dynamically change your delegated IPv6 prefixes and just silently break your static configurations, you have to make sure you document and track those prefixes rigorously in your IPAM system. Embrace these rules, and seriously, stop treating normal IPv6 behavior as an error.
There's a quote from the source material that really serves as the ultimate takeaway here. A dual-stack failure may be completely invisible without explicit IPv6 testing. Because of happy eyeballs and dual-stack masking, you simply cannot trust basic browser tests anymore. You have to remember to always isolate the failing protocol explicitly during your diagnostics. Use explicit commands right in your terminal, like curl-6 or curl-4. That forces the connection over a specific stack and cuts right through all that dual-stack ambiguity. The paradigm has completely shifted. So the real question is, will you update your legacy network reflexes, or will your next outage just remain a silent, invisible mystery? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. I truly hope this breakdown helps you unlearn some of those old habits and really prepares you for the dual-stack reality of modern networking.